For those of you that don't know me, my name is Walter Alcorn. I'm the supervisor for the Hunter Mill District on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. For those of you that were here in July, I had a town hall meeting similarly, well, actually in this exact spot. And we had a discussion about a number of things relating to Lake Ann and also to specifically LARCA and the property and the infrastructure owned by LARCA. So this is a follow-up to that meeting. At the time, there was, I mentioned, and there were some questions relating to an engineering study that was underway, a consultant study actually. And tonight, we're gonna see the results of that. And we do have the authors of the study here. So I'm going to go through very quickly these slides and give everybody an opportunity to ask questions about the study. And I think we'll probably wrap up by about 6 o'clock. I actually have another meeting at 6:30 and then another one at 7. So anyway, I will need to head out by at least 6:15 or so. So we'll shoot for, say, 6 o'clock. So let's go ahead and just go through these slides. Thank you, Jose. So I think everybody knows, I don't really need to go over the background here of Lake Ann. The main thing I want to emphasize here is the fourth and fifth bullets. We are interested in Fairfax County, and I personally, as the representative of this area on the County Board of Supervisors, I'm interested in making sure that Lake Ann has a sustainable path forward. There are revitalization. There's revitalization that needs to happen, and I do want to make sure that that this historic community does continue. So the other point I'll just emphasize at the end, this is really not something that the county can just come in and say, hey, you guys, here's the answer. This is really going to have to be a community engagement exercise. I'm going to need your ideas and your thoughts, and there's going to need to be a lot of discussion outside of this room about the future of Lake Ann and what you want to see happen here at Lake Ann.
What is that?
Who brought the drone?
Shop or something.
Is it a swarm of bees? I hope not.
It sounds like
Something
buzzing
buzzing
in front of a microphone.
Oh, what does it sound like? That's up to our art studio.
No.
All right, so
Do something in
let's go on to the next slide then, Jose.
In the studio over there.
Oh, okay.
This is on the National Register of Historic Places. And by the way, I think there's some construction going on. I don't know if somebody's already seen the report and they're starting repairs. Maybe that's what's going on. That would be great.
That was really impressive.
Yeah, that's really fast. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, Jose. A couple of points here. You know, the county is involved in this, one, because Lake Ann is a revitalization area. And two, this really is the historic heart and soul of Reston. LARCA is private, so this is not part of Fairfax County government. It's not part of any local government. It's owned by a private association, which is, in effect, the 131 condominium owners in Lake Ann. So it is complicated by the fact that it's not just LARCA that owns the immediate area of Lake Ann and the Plaza and the surrounding area. So go to the next slide, Jose. This is one of my favorite slides. This shows in different colors, and you probably can't see it. There are copies of this presentation that we can hand out afterwards. But this shows different colors. LARCA is in this color yellow. So the parking lot here, Heron House, Quayside, the J, Washington Plaza, and then back, well, and then Chimney House, and then the parking lot. Not all the parking lot, of course, but a lot of the parking lot just out here. Couple other, and everyone else, every other part here is owned by somebody else. So I would just note one other thing from Fairfax County's perspective. This light green area is owned by Fairfax County. That's That's the Crescent Apartments, which was purchased by Fairfax County several years ago. So go back to the previous slide if you could, Jose. So one thing I do want to emphasize, and this is another reason that Fairfax County is involved in this, the Plaza, it really has been at least treated as a public place. Even though it's privately owned by LARCA for many years, it's clearly something that the public has taken advantage of, has used and enjoyed, and hopefully will continue to be so well into the future. Okay, go ahead, 2 slides, Jose. So with some of the issues that came up here, I was asked to engage almost a year ago now. So out of that engagement came this study, which I'll be summarizing here in a minute, where we're looking to assess the current infrastructure owned by LARCA, estimate in very rough terms the infrastructure fixes, how much it would cost. There were several things, it's important to note, that were not included in this study. And that includes basically getting it up to Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, any stormwater or sewer upgrades, because those aren't visible. So basically this conditions assessment was on everything that's visible. And then RELAC was not part of this, and potentially other utilities. So go on to the next one. So this is pretty much what was found, and I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anybody. There is a lot that needs significant repair. So the exteriors of the buildings, the brick and concrete surfaces, many existing mechanical, plumbing, and electrical systems are original from the 1960s. And I'll just stop there and note, as you hear this, as you look at the study, and you see things that you know are not accurate, let us know. Because there may well be things in there, there may be information we didn't have or our consultant didn't have. The balconies are deteriorating, and then of course the parking lots also need attention. So these estimates are conservative. They may be high. The most pressing infrastructure concerns are estimated at close to $20 million. Additional costs for less critical repairs are estimated at more than $17 million. So the total estimated costs are somewhere in the ballpark, and these are ballpark estimates, of about $37 million. Okay. So this breaks down the next 2 slides where they are. Now these codes are, code 1 is the most critical need in terms of what needs addressing first, or at least the most critical. Code 2 is all the way down to code 5. And Tom, if I could call on you, Tom was the chief author of this. Can you just describe a little bit the coding?
Sure. Code 1 is items that may include a current life safety concern. These are things like you're installing concrete on balconies where a piece of concrete could potentially fall off and injure someone, or a loose railing, things that should be addressed from a safety standpoint. Code 2 is things that would involve rapid deterioration if not repaired very soon. There might be a wall that's missing a cap, so water is infiltrating the wall, and with freeze thaw cycles, it can start to cause significant further damage immediately. Code 3 is similar, but it's things that will accelerate damage over a slightly longer period of time, where the damage occurs over an extended period where it's not repaired. Code 4 is bringing things up to current codes compliance, things like mechanical and electrical systems that should be current for an occupied space. And then code 5 are really things that should be addressed as a part of an ongoing long-term plan. So if you are, say, replacing mechanical units at a time, then you should address other items along with those repairs. There's some benefit to doing those in concert with other work. And that's
Thank you.
Quick question, are
That's
those
all.
definitions, are they official definitions somewhere, or?
They're in the report.
They're in the report?
Yeah.
But they're not like an external definition, like they're not tied to whether or not we're up to code in one of those things.
I mean, we created these codes as just a means to put the work into a hierarchy so that you could see which things really should be addressed first. And how
So-
rapidly they're addressed obviously just needs further discussion.
So you created the codes just for this particular project, or are these codes that you've created for all of the kind of projects that you do?
No, just for this specific
You
project.
created a set of codes just for this particular project?
I mean, you could call them codes, you could call them
Priority.
Priority.
highest priority
Priorities.
one, priority
Priorities,
two.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Groups.
right.
Okay, and actually, John, let me go through real quick, and we're almost through the slides, and then we'll come back, so hang out, Tom, but
Sure.
thank you very much. So this is broken down by the different areas, and you can see the different priority codes and for the different areas. And Jose, go to the next slide, there are two more, I believe. Yeah, so then Washington Plaza and the parking lots. Okay, go on to the next one. So add it up. Do you have a quick question?
Yeah, you go back to the prior,
Sure.
few slides back.
Okay.
So what are you defining as Washington Plaza? Is the plaza itself what we refer to as a commercial plaza?
Yeah, it's
The bricks?
It's the brick area and the concrete space, and it does not include the wood decking. It's everything to that water bulkhead.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yep. Okay, good question. Next, and then, so this shows the total, highest priority, about $5 million, and then 14 million at the priority 2, and then on down. Go ahead. So just a couple of other factors, then I'll open it up to questions. So we do expect to see the General Assembly do some sort of legislation, introduce it. The Surfside issue in Florida certainly has gotten a lot of people's attention about condo maintenance. The scale of costs, I think it's worth noting, certainly it's in my mind, given that there are only 131 units, this is a big number. This is a big number. The third one, you know, the whole concept of a condominium association hasn't been with us that long. It's in law and by law, it's private, but in effect, it really was a way for, if you will, miniature local governments to be created, you know, starting about 50 years ago. So we're starting to see, not just here in Reston, but in other parts of Fairfax County and all over the country, condominium developments, condominium communities that have deteriorating infrastructure. So there is an open policy question, and as I talk to my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors, you know, when I tell them the needs here at Lake Ann, I've heard, well, you know what, I have some old condominium communities as well, and they need help too. And then, of course, I make the point about being on the National Register of Historic Places and a revitalization area, but still, there is that long-term overarching policy from a county perspective on private infrastructure needs. The other thing I'd know, you know, some of the revitalization models, Vantage Hill is doing something very interesting just up the street. They're coming through the county's approval process right now, but in effect what they've done is they've taken an old pool site, swimming pool, they're not using anymore, and they're taking a little bit of their parking lot, and they're actually now talking to their third developer. Looks like this one may work out, I don't know. But in effect, that developer is paying the community the right to develop 31 townhouses on that common area. And that is actually paying for them to repair their infrastructure, because they have a similarly aged infrastructure that we see here at Lake Ann. So anyway, I'm not sure everybody is aware of that. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but that process is moving forward. The other factor, and I mentioned this earlier, there are potentially other costs that are not yet assessed because they weren't visible to the consultant, and I think we identified those. Go ahead, Jose. So, what's next is the big question. That's not something that we'll be talking about tonight, or at least that I don't have a proposal to come to you with at this point. I wanted to have this meeting, I wanted to have an opportunity for you to ask questions of the consultant author. And frankly, I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to think about this and to think about what you think needs to happen here at Lake Ann and what you want to see happen. So that is really, for me, what's next. But I do believe to lose this treasure would be devastating for Reston residents in the county. So I believe in terms of the county role, you know, it's possible, and I would certainly hope to see Fairfax County play somewhat of a bridge role, so that the county's not a developer. That's not what the county does, but perhaps the county could play some sort of a role, like a bridge, between what's here and the needs here and some future state of Lake Ann. And working with you all, working with the community, working with LARCA is something I'm committed to, and hopefully out of this we can find a path forward that works. So I think that's it on the slides. So questions, John, you had your hand up.
Maybe a clarification, it's kind of not a lot of good news, but I do see some very good news. I, for one, was expecting that after all the problems on the east side, that they might have found subsurface structural problems that could have been much bigger. I assume there's some good news here, or was that thoroughly looked at? I guess I wanted clarification.
That has not been reviewed. Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, one of the recommendations of the report was to do some subsurface ground penetrating radar to study if there is any undermining from that water under Wayside.
So that really has not been addressed yet?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So that could be another.
That clarification is important.
It is very important, you're right. Yes.
On your chart screen.
Yeah,
what is
you wanna
the
go back to
difference
that?
Between the J commercial and J, you have two, yeah.
Yeah, Tom, do you want to address that?
What's the
The
commercial?
commercial building, basically where we are now.
Yeah.
And then the J is starting with the corner, yeah, and then around. And frankly, we struggled a little bit, what we call the commercial building. I mean, is that what this is called? I don't.
Well, no, the whole ground floor.
Yeah.
Of Chimney House, which includes
Right.
this, is considered our commercial plaza, part of our commercial
Yeah,
unit.
it did say commercial plaza earlier, and frankly, I had to change because I was confused.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing you say is that Chimney House is our residential and commercial units owners in the J.
Is that right, Tom?
Yeah, Amy, let's clarify, yeah. Amy's our project manager who is involved in more of the survey.
Yeah,
on
so
the ground.
the J, the stuff in the J building is literally the loop around on that side and the residences that are on the back side of the J. And then the plaza is this building and basically over to the loading dock as part of the.
And we're calling it commercial
Is
building.
that made clear in the report because the names are gonna be a little confusing for us?
Okay.
You made it more confusing.
Yeah, yeah, you want to change it to commercial plaza?
I can.
Yeah, can you change it now?
It's a
And
screenshot.
basically, even Quayside and technically Herrenhouse have commercial spaces on the first floor.
Right.
So it's not the first floor, it's the J.
So that should say commercial
This is
plaza,
not the J.
is that right? Yeah,
No, so it's not a commercial.
instead of commercial building.
So that's.
Commercial building could be this part and the J is the other part.
Yeah, that's what
Where
it's.
does this
It's the
building
first floor
go?
of the whole
I
plaza.
think it'll be a little more clear in the report because it'll show item by item what was observed, so you'll have a location of where there's.
Yeah.
Does your map show what you're referring to, the way
Yes.
you have it?
There's a map in the
displayed here?
report, isn't there?
I don't know if you have the slide of the whole report though.
But is there a map in the report?
You had a map earlier.
The labels on
So I hate to say this, but we have two copies of the report here. We do have, Lisa, can you tell online how folks can access it? Is it
Sure,
up
you
online?
just go to Hunter Mill, the
Here, I'll pass
fairfaxcounty.gov/Hunter
this on.
Mill. And we'll have that, as soon as I get access to my computer from Jose, it'll be up there.
So it will be online.
Oh, yeah, but momentarily.
The building across the way, that's part of our cluster, with the coffee house and the hair salons are E-block of our house. Is that, does that appear in this nomenclature at all?
Here's another copy.
You didn't because that
You wanna pass it?
wasn't part of Walker.
I just have 3, and it's online.
Which one?
There's 2 reports.
Um,
This is the actual report.
That's the actual report, and here, here are copies of the slides. Yeah. So here you go. Rick? Yeah. Go ahead. You had a question?
Oh, I was just gonna remark that, those building designations that actually are separate buildings, this building is not connected to part of it. Yeah, it's a separate structure, and so that's why they're probably done this way, that, from a structural standpoint, they're two different. There's no separation visually, they're back to back, and there's no path split.
And that's how you did it, is that right? Okay. Yes.
In the report, did you guys evaluate at all how much upkeep, renewing and stuff has been done? I mean, you're saying this stuff has been here since the 60s, which we know, but I would hope that since the 60s, in the last 20, 30 years, that things have been done. I mean, did you look at, like, what percentage of, how well has the building, has LARCA kept up the facility over the last 20, 25 years?
Was that in the scope, or?
I mean, what we started with was reviewing available documentation, and that could have been meeting with some of the LARCA individuals to see what they've done recently, looking at original construction documents for the plans, and then making a lot of cursory visual observations, like walking the buildings and looking at spaces that could be visually assessed to make recommendations. We didn't go back and try to determine a history of specifically what items were deferred versus implemented so long ago. It was really just more of a capture in time from this kind of initial perspective. What is, where we're at.
In terms of sustainability, you would think, you kind of want to know to give somebody.
I mean, there was the ability to look
$20 million,
at
is the
mechanical
work actually
equipment and see, like, is this at the end of its typical usable lifespan or not? And we did meet with LARCA about what they had performed, but we did not try to build a history of past renovations.
Some of the mechanical equipment itself, like the boilers, have nameplates that have things, and they were installed and things like that as well.
Would you consider this study to be usable as a budget planning estimate? I mean, or just a precursor?
It's really a cursory study meant to identify areas that need further study and addressing and detailed design plans for how they're resolved. But they are estimates attached to these to give a conceptual level of understanding.
And the enumeration of what is actually included in the numbers in each of the boxes on this chart is.
Yeah, so there may be a breakdown per building of 50 items, and
Bring
it
up a copy of
addresses
the report.
which
Maybe
priority
take
code
that
each
off.
one is in, and
Yeah,
it
just
describes
show.
the item, like, there's a retaining wall that has a brick that's falling or joints that are coming apart, and that we think is item 2. And then it's summarized in the cost estimate.
Did you
So we're
see
gonna.
the reserve study? The last reserve study done? Whether or not there was any sync between what that said needed to be done and what actually needs to be done?
Yeah, we did review previous studies as a part, just to see areas specifically where we needed to look. It kind of said, hey, these are things we want to make sure we check out.
So we actually are bringing up the actual study. So we'll run through and at least you can see how it's formatted and the level of detail. What do you think? Should we go to maybe the tables or?
Sure. I mean, you can, if you just, maybe the next page, I think, is, these are the legend of how we rank those priority codes, if you're referring back, which we talked about, and then you can just keep scrolling. There's a lot of information. It talks about what was not included, like the ADA, Supervisor mentioned, an implementation plan. Obviously, if things are deferred further, then there's a potential for greater deterioration and additional costs. There's also the understanding that if you defer maintenance for longer, paying for it in a future year market may be more expensive due to escalation and other costs. And then we went went directly into each building, like the market deli space and architectural items. We included an architect for the survey, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, as well as a structural engineer. So those were the ones. Civil engineering was not included, but we did make some visual observations of parking areas and outdoor plaza spaces. So you can kind of see there's a narrative description of each item, and this goes through every building, so there's just pages and pages of this.
Yeah, and maybe just take an example here, Chimney House Commercial Plaza, and you can see the architecture. Bricks and mortar throughout the building are dirty, with some areas showing signs of mold growth, effervescence.
Each item is numbered there, and then there's the recommendation list later in the report that has, there's a summary of the item and the costs all on one page, and it references that same number. And we also have photographs again in the appendixes that reference the same numbers.
So we
kind of coded to that number.
tried to prioritize these into groups of which things were our first understanding, but you know, LARCA and you may decide, I want to address some items from 2 and some from 3 along with 1, or maybe you could pick and choose by item that you want to address moving forward.
Yeah, this gets into more of the detail. This is in the back. So with the J, it basically takes what those summary descriptions of the issue was, puts them in this table, and then provides a cost estimate.
And there was one last item, there was the 5 priority codes, but also in the study, we looked at some things that we identified were tenant-owned spaces, like your own windows. Certainly those are not part of LARCA's property, so those were identified in the report as, you know, tenant cost items, like you may want to replace the wood frame windows on the Quayside building. But that would be a tenant cost item.
Yes.
So it kind of occurs to me, based on what I'm seeing as it flashes by and from what you're saying, some of these things, for example, replacing the railings on the balconies, you know, to bring them up to code, the rusting, but as long as the rust is removed and they're refinished and put back, it maintains the historical integrity. So, and the other thing is, that's just one example. So, you know, we're historical in our endeavors to stay that way and not to shy away from the kinds of repairs that need to be done. I don't want to misstate that. But also, some of the things that are on this list is not an expense that's going to be incurred by LARCA. So as an example, I think I saw it might be on a previous screen, you know, there's talk about wood frames. Wood frames in our windows are owned by the unit owners. They have an obligation to keep the property up to snuff. And if in fact there's a need to replace those windows, it's going to have to be at the cost. So you're saying replace windows and flashings.
Yeah,
In
right,
this case,
right here. That's
Yeah.
right. Go up higher, Jose. There you go. That's a tenant cost.
Right. Now, there may be a project, much like we did many years ago, which Martha Green was involved in, where Heron House windows were all replaced. Unit owners all came together to have a loan to get this done, and they had choices to make. So I just want people to understand what you're hearing is, in the best of worlds, these would be all the things, and we need to figure out, you know, it appears that we need to figure out what is right for us, not talking about things that must be repaired. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that some of this is incurred by the owners as well.
That's where there's a tenant.
Yeah, but hopefully with 131 units and that many millions of dollars, the owners aren't taking that big of a chunk of it.
Well, no, I don't think that's what they're saying. It's just you take it and you broke it down at the most basic levels, which is very useful for us. I do want to ask a question, just so that everybody understands. We have to have, as an HOA, we have to have reserve studies done. Is any portion of this an acceptable replacement for our reserve studies? Because you've got estimates in here for what it takes to repair certain things. It doesn't do the end result, which is make a reserve study analysis of how much we really should be holding in place.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we did some assessments and came up with some costs, but we didn't make a recommendation on how quickly you should spend or what avenues you should pursue to rectify the issue. So I'd say you could use this as an appendix or a portion of a study. You're certainly welcome to the information. We don't have any You know, so, but it's not meant to say this is exactly how you should proceed, it's just identifying the categories of what needs to be done.
What tools does the county have to get LARCA to pay for some of the code 1s and 2s on there?
Well, you know, the county has already received complaints of code violations, you know, into our process. You know, honestly, I'm not sure there's a notice of violation process that can underway. You know, the scale of some of these is going to be a challenge for LARCA or for anybody to try to address them. So we could, you know, maybe at a future meeting, you could have somebody here that knows more detail the county's enforcement process and code implementation. So, Rick.
Yeah, well, you know, the scale of this is, you know, very impressive, whatever you want to call it, but it's not a surprise for most of us. And even the $20 million figure, if you calculate that we contribute presently, our reserve funding from the owners comes in at $500,000 each year. So $20 million, by the time we got that done, at the same rate of contribution, that's 40 years. We haven't even gotten to code 2 at that point. So the real question to me here is, we know that this is more than daunting. So the real question is, well, what's the next set of information that we might be able to get from the county? You mentioned your peers have the same issues and problems, and this is not uncommon to condominiums in general. So this is you know, not bigger than, it's bigger than a community problem, it's bigger than one condo problem. And we will not have the answer on our own.
Right.
So the real question is, what's the next chapter or chapters that we will need to be informed about? Or are we just going to think that, well, we're just going to be on our own? Because yes, the board can enforce contributions, but it would be, you know, 5, 10 times the amount that people are paying today.
Right.
Just to make a dent in such a do list. So I guess my question is, and I'm not expecting an answer tonight, but what's going to happen next in terms of the county involvement? What are the things that you're thinking about as you talk to your peers? And what are other jurisdictions doing? Do we know? Are there answers out there that we could learn from? So,
Well, good questions, Rick, and I'll just repeat what I said in July. You know, one of the options that the county is looking at is the possibility of providing assistance to address at least some of these needs as in exchange for development rights of LARCA's common area. So certainly in the name of revitalization, it's pretty clear that 131 units managing all this alone is probably not sustainable, even if these are addressed, you know, some way in the next few years. This is a tremendous burden on the community. So certainly that's one option. Is look at maybe similar to the proposal that was tried a few years ago that the county was involved in. You know, there may be some financing options, you know, and assistance in terms of loans that could be provided as well. You know, one of the things that I think is special about Lake Ann is, you know, for anybody like Jose who goes through architecture school, they know about this place. You know, they know about Lake Ann. People still come here, you know, people who are interested in urban planning, people are interested in architecture, and the history of that in postmodern U.S. I mean, this is really well known as an area. So one other possibility, and this is something perhaps the county can help with, but a lot of it would probably need to come from, frankly, individuals, is initiate discussions with people who care about Lake Ann and who have resources to help. So, you know, we're really looking, I think, at several different options. you know, in terms of anything analogous in in Fairfax County, there's nothing like this that we've seen or done. We really don't have exactly this type of situation that we've seen before. There are other places, though, that are undertaking community-driven initiatives to redevelop. I'm not suggesting that that's what you want to do here, but there's a case in the Mount Vernon district right now where the vast majority of owners are looking to the county to help facilitate redevelopment of their building. So, you know, there are a number of options out there on the table, and I know many of you have been living this, have been thinking about this for a long time. So one of the things I'd like to see, frankly, is as folks do have additional ideas on how the county could help, I'm all ears.
When you say that, how can we provide ideas like that, just by emailing you?
Email is fine. I mean, frankly, we could do another one of these meetings in a few weeks. You know, if that's helpful, give everybody the chance to you know, look through the report, think about, you know, what might make sense. Because I do think Lake Ann is at an inflection point right now. And so this is something that we do need everybody to be thinking about and to provide input. Because, I mean, frankly, this is your property. You know, these are your homes, these are your businesses, and I want to make sure that this is something that you all want to do, whatever the direction is. Yeah, did you have another comment? I'm sorry.
Well, she had her hand up first.
Okay.
Yeah, I did study architecture, which is the whole reason that I'm living here. I learned about this place when I was in college in architecture class. And so as such, you know, I am really concerned about it staying and keeping its historical and look and feel as it was originally designed. So when you talk about revitalization, what do you mean by revitalization? Is it something that's going to be fitting in with what exists, or is it going to be something like that has nothing to do with this architecture, this community, this whole sense? And then second question is, given it is a historic property, is there any kind of funding that's used to help maintain or support historic properties? I know in Chicago there was. So
In
there's
Fairfax
nothing
County,
in-
there is not.
Well, it's a national, so is there any kind of national funding?
We can
Tax
certainly look
credits.
into that. Yes?
Federal rehabilitation tax credits,
Okay, tax credits.
20% tax credits.
So
Tax
basically, if
to
you're a
individual
developer.
owners or to LARCA
Well,
or to?
it has to be done through the Virginia Department of Historic Resources, and we talked to them a little bit preliminarily, but it's very complicated, and they would probably try to work with us, but you know, whether it's LARCA or individual owners or some other entity that applies the credit, has to be determined. We're exploring though.
And on your first point, I mean, I don't want to see the historic nature of Lake Ann change. I mean,
So
it
what do you-
loses.
So
It
what is
loses so much.
revitalization in that context?
Well, I wasn't around for this, but there was a lot of discussion about the last revitalization plan, and I know many of you were. There was a lot of give and take and a lot of back and forth. Frankly, I'm not excited about reopening that, but I don't know. I mean, honestly, the plan, I don't know if the plan that ultimately was adopted is sufficient to address this. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, considering the historic designation and it seems there's a lot of things in here that refer to present codes. Can't we grandfather some of these things? I'm afraid of like them changing the railings on the balconies to fit present codes. I don't know what present codes are. But can't some of those things be grandfathered in?
That's a great question. Do you know,
I can
Tom?
address a little bit of that. So,
Yeah.
there's two different things. There's the code, which is applied when you seek a building permit. So first off, if you're making repairs that are, you know, non-permit requiring repairs, then those codes don't necessarily have to be updated for change. But the ADA is a civil rights legislation.
Yeah.
So that's not a code. That's enforced by the Department of Justice. So this property being developed pre-1990, it isn't gonna be compliant with ADA, you'll notice the lack of handicap accessibility and all kinds of spaces and buildings. Those really should be assessed and managed for being resolved. I think all those things can be done in a sensitive manner so that it doesn't take away from the historic nature of the facility and the site. I mean, as an architect, I have never heard anyone talk about wanting to change the aesthetic or the historic presence of this community.
Yeah,
So I think everyone's kind of safe in having the same opinion.
Well, the opinions are fine, but when it comes up to, when you put up against federal law, you know, it seems like we're gonna lose. Right.
No, I'm
I mean,
talking about the
our elevators
visual,
in Kern House are,
the
I assume,
exterior
not
visuals of the
ADA
building.
compliant. And to make those code compatible would, I have no idea how you do that.
And I don't
Well-
know, like where I'm from, the minute you break open to apply for a permit to make any kind of major structural changes, you kick in that any type of grandfathering you've had before for not doing ADA is gone.
Well, so the way it works in Fairfax County is if you need a building permit for work, then you're required to spend up to 20% of that budgeted amount to accommodate lack of accessibility items. You don't necessarily have to overburden by paying for more than what the
Is that
scope
20%
is.
for that cost? for
So the
that?
20% that we saved through tax credit.
Yeah, and by the way, at a future meeting, I'm happy to have somebody from code enforcement be here to talk about exactly this issue. I know it can be a pain. I know it because I've dealt with situations where, frankly, you know, owners of institutional buildings are trying to do something like put a new elevator in, and it triggers a lot.
And
As
that's
I know.
something that we deal with very frequently. is
Yeah,
How do you,
yeah.
how do you blend a ramp into the space without changing the look? Or how do you, you just have to look at it from a sensitive perspective.
I was particularly talking about the balcony railings. I don't know why they don't conform to code anymore. Are they too short?
Yeah.
Or
And
is it too wide?
and the balusters are too far apart.
So that's gonna
Oh,
change.
yeah, hold on.
But they're not tall enough, and the spacing between the pickets is wider than 4 inches. So the idea is that you don't want anything like slim and get stuck in a railing, so you have to do that.
In the back, and then, go ahead.
Thank you. On your final slide, you talked about the county potentially being a bridge.
Yes.
And we've got a lot of solutioning already going on and questions and things. Is it possible, not only with our members, but interested parties, is there a way to put the word out in Fairfax County, local universities? I mean, this is a national treasure, and it has a reputation in architect schools and whatever. Could we pull some people together to do some really innovative thinking around ways to cut costs, hit this crack? Because as one of the 131 owners, my heart is palpitating at that number. But can we bring in a brain trust to help us map out what's possible, to help us then determine what our choices are and what we'll do?
Yeah, yeah. The answer is yes. I mean, if frankly, if that's where folks want to go, I mean, that's basically it. But that's definitely on the table, I would say. Yeah.
One of the things on the table at the national level is there is a grant program funding for historical, Save America's Treasures. So that's at the national level. Under our prior presidency, the board that actually does the work to do awards was not seated. They had the money, but they could not distribute money because there was nobody to distribute it. And, you know, we visited this prior to COVID. You know, obviously the political climate has changed, and it's worth checking again to see if the board has been sacked. Because great to have money if you can't use it, you can't give it. It, you know, it would be a worthwhile application. And we talked with a grant writer that was local that had been involved in I don't know what that was, doesn't make me happy. But we talked to the grant writer that had success in working with award and got awarded out of that particular, so that is open to us. Interestingly enough, our particular condominium fits the criteria, this whole area because of what it is. So while we have the original designation, which is historic overlay, there's still an opportunity for something more. I'm not saying there's nothing else out there. As somebody who's had to do financial reporting on grants, it is a pain to deal with, but if the outcome is worth it, if you get bang for buck, it's worth spending the time to do that. I'm just saying that's something that is out there and available to us.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's
I
such,
happened to look into this,
oh,
those specific programs, several of them. And as you know, I'm the grant proposal writer, so I was very interested in this. And it turned out that they really wanted to see that we had a plan to actually maintain the property, which we don't. And maybe out of this, we come up with a plan which would make us eligible for those types of loan grants that are available. But they were really quite serious about giving their money to people who were serious about having a plan and executing it. Carolyn, you were talking about bringing people in, and the county did help us. Kathy Hudgens helped us 20 years ago, and we had innumerable charrettes. And they hired consultants to come in, and we did do blue sky brainstorming. So just as a point of history. Been there, done it. Got a lot of interesting ideas.
Cheryl.
We have several times repaired the railings without having to go to the code. And it does, that is one area where it significantly affects the historic nature of the property. But in addition to that, if you take a look at the Baptist church, if you're gonna go ADA compliant, you may as well make it a big piece of sculpture because there's no way to get in there without going up steps.
I mean, the church wasn't included in the study.
No, it's not ours.
Because of being outside of LARCA.
I can't hear.
Yes, the church was included.
It's not ours.
There's,
They had to do it.
yeah, there's stuff that
You're right. That is odd.
From a historical perspective, that would be odd, yes.
Yes. That's, other questions or comments? Yes.
I might point out that Heron House is ADA accessible, the ramp on the brick level.
It's not the code.
And
You're right.
the
You're right.
ramp in front of Quayside. Chimney House is a real ball of twine because there are two separate areas. There's room to put ramps,
Oh, that's huge, yeah.
but they're split and nothing's ever been done with those.
There's also room to put some kind of like elevator-y type of thing going up those big wide stairs, so.
You may want to consider doing a barrier removal plan or an ADA assessment, because that's just one of the things that was excluded from the study was where are the barriers to accessibility, and are there some that are difficult to accommodate with historic preservation, and are there others that are very easy? Are there some that are higher cost and some that are very inexpensive? It might be as simple as the type of hardware on a door that makes it so someone can open the door more easily. Not everything is kind of infrastructure difficult for ADA, but that assessment has not been completed as part of this report.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, ADA is far from being the most important critical item on your list. So you have other things that would take priority
him
for
to
the
say.
first $20 million.
But replacing, fixing concrete spalling and stuff like that, I mean, some of this is definitely doable by itself.
Yes.
Let's see, because, the district has a lot of old buildings, and probably not all of them are financially stellar, but we haven't seen, I don't know about, the people taking buildings. I mean, they're at different jurisdiction, of course, but, more experience than in Fairfax County.
Well, you're right, we don't have experience doing this. I mean, we really don't. So, yeah, that's something I can definitely.
Maybe when we're 250 years old, we have experience with it.
But no, we are looking into other jurisdictions, we can definitely look into DC and how they do it.
I know you're getting ready to wrap up, and as you said, you have other meetings. For me, as a follow-up to this follow-up, I want to know whether or not any of the people that did this report are available to the LARCA board to have discussions and assistance with, in our reserve projects committee, to have discussions about how maybe to prioritize some of the more critical ones. Because, you know, we could look at all this and come up with great ideas, but the bottom line is there's some we must take care of now. And we are in the middle of budget, so we'd like to know if people are available.
Yeah, I mean, so we're contracted directly through the Department of Public Works, so if they would be willing to involve us in that process, that's up, you know, we could do that up to you.
Yeah, we can follow up on that.
Very good, I'll come over at the end. And then you talked about, you know, having a follow-up, so you might, you know, I like Caroline's idea about like a brain trust, or the people that are really good at this kind of thing. You know, we're volunteers and owners, and we need some assistance with the brain power to come up with, brainstorming to come up with what we can do. So I'd like to see some more of those kind of things. I don't really want to opine personally on anything. I want people who are already experts in those fields to come to us and say, this is what I know you can do. This is how you can deal with grandfathering something in. How do you prevent having to follow current code and replace something that's historical? Prevention mechanisms and, you know, those kind of things. So that's what I'd like to see.
I mean, there is an existing building code and international building code, a new building code that Virginia adopts and then Fairfax uses. So there is an existing building code that is slightly different from a new building code. So you don't necessarily have to build it like a new building, but there is a clarification there.
Yes.
About the preservation aspect, I do think that the rest of the county probably needs a little education about what this is and why it's important. I actually saw Lake Ann being built when I was a kid. My family used to bring visitors from out of town here to look at Lake Ann as this show place. And I'm thinking that every major project that has to do with an historic property or a historic place is complicated. It's always complicated. That's why people tear buildings down left and right. And in Fairfax County, I've had personal experience with that, having my childhood home and demolished in the last year. The National Trust for Historic Preservation deals with this stuff all the time. And I'm sure there are people here who are aware of that. And I just want to be sure that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There are people who specialize in this stuff about architectural integrity versus codes, grandfathering, all of that stuff. I think we need, if it's not happening already, we need to reach out to somebody, because I certainly don't know how to do it, and I think we could probably sit in a room and talk all day about the railings. And you know, there are people who do this for a living, or who study this as a matter of course. That's all I'm tossing in here.
I think that's similar to the suggestion we got earlier, which is to bring somebody in to help with this.
Yeah, I think it needs to be done. I mean, nobody wants to spend more money on consultants, but hey, you know, it's certainly beyond my pay grade.
Well, like George said, a lot of this stuff is really basic and is probably maybe in a few areas like the railings and maybe code issues, but it's really about money and prioritization and we have some rehabilitation to do in our financial, you know, how we plan and work our finances in our community.
Well,
And that's sort of like, I mean, no plan, I think, would be believable until we can present a good plan and good books and all that.
Yeah, I would just point out, you know, I think one of the challenges that frankly you have as a community, as LARCA, is coherence. You know, the divisions in the community are well known. I mean, it's in court. It's, you know, allegations of criminal activity. That does not help. The honest to God truth is nobody would touch this community with that going on. So I just want to say that. That's something else that you're going to have to figure out. County can't do that for you. That's something you're going to have to figure out. So I would encourage you to be thinking beyond those divisions and what's next. You know, what, because you all have a common interest. You all have, you know, yeah. Anyway, I do appreciate what you say, and perhaps, you know, bringing in somebody to help. Yes?
I was struck by the fact that the conversation this evening is focused on LARCA. There are a number of other owners around the lake who have buildings that are of the same age and the same build quality. And my question is, have you underestimated, with all those figures that you've got displayed up there, the actual cost of revitalizing Lake Anne Village Center as opposed to LARCA?
Put the map up. So just to address that very quickly, I think it's important to emphasize, there we go. We're just looking at the light yellow, oops, portion of that. The point is correct. There are other, well, there's certainly other parts of Lake Anne. There's other infrastructure in Lake Anne that is not addressed by this.
There's another 4 separately owned units and associations around the lake. We're not just the only people who live here. There are others. Just opposite us, we have the E-block opposite us. That's not owned by LARCA.
No, that's absolutely correct.
The vet place at the end there, that's not owned by LARCA. So we have a number of buildings and a number of, specifically the cluster, around the lake. And I see no figures, because for revitalization of those structures, they are the same age as LARCA. They were built at the same time.
Right.
They have the same problems. And I think that this study has seriously underestimated the actual cost.
For the larger Lake Anne. Yeah,
It's not our property around the rest of the lake.
yeah. The only reason, again, as I said very early on, the only reason the county paid for this study is 1, revitalization. This is a revitalization area, and 2, I had folks come to me that didn't have hot water, and there clearly were issues here that were calling for public attention. So you're right, though, that there is a bigger revitalization issue and infrastructure renewal, if you will, in the broader Lake Anne. The property map doesn't help, but it is what it is. These are lines that were drawn a long time ago, and I think do create some challenges. But I think not everybody in this room is LARCA. Most of you are, but I think I'm very much willing to have the broader conversation as well, because it's in the interest not just of LARCA owners, but of the broader Reston and I would say Fairfax County to make sure this gets addressed and fixed. So, yes, and then we do need to wrap up.
In the previous meeting, you said that you would initiate an effort to pull together a committee of individuals to get together and try to come up with ideas. Is that still your plan? Or are you going to leave it to us here to do it? Because if that's the case, it's not going to happen.
Well, I've heard two recommendations that are specific. That's one that I just heard. And then the other one from a couple of folks about bringing somebody in. Yeah, I'm happy to pull together a group of you all who want to actually have a discussion about this. So yeah, I'm happy to do that.
I would just feel like anyone who's interested should be part of this group.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the honest to God truth is, for anything to change, for any of this to really move forward, there has to be consensus. You know, it's got to make sense for everybody. Yeah, or near, right. Consensus doesn't mean unanimity, but you know, getting close to there. So yeah, I'd be happy to put that together in the next couple of weeks. Okay, any final questions before we break? I'll be around for a few minutes, and in my office, Jose, I think many of you know Jose, who's on point, and also, is Lisa? Oh, Lisa's back there in the back. This information is going to be, Lisa, is it on the website yet?
It will be as soon as I'm over to the computer.
Okay, so go to the Hunter Mill District webpage, and there'll be a link to that, is that correct? To the report?
On the front page of
Yes, yep, right there. As soon as you go on to fairfax9.gov/Hunter Mill, we're going to fairfax9.gov and do a search, Hunter Mill. It'll be there as soon as you open that main page.
Okay, last word.
Yeah, now I'm just saying, you have that list over there. That's
Yes.
fine, so maybe we can put a star, something next to our name, if we're interested in being on the group, we'll know actually we might just need to.
Okay, or we can, what we'll do is we'll send an email around to everybody on that list and ask them if they want to be a part of the group. Okay, all right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.